Canada has a drug overdose problem. From March 2016 to March 2018, on average 10 people died of a drug overdose every single day, according to new federal analysis. This number shows just how stark the problem is. Drugs don't only affect the users, but they affect everyone around them. Too many people chalk up the drug problem to people getting addicted. But what lies beneath the addiction is the true problem. Those who live in poverty, along with those who have mental issues, are way more likely to die of a drug overdose than any other demographic. This video will use social change terms and theories to analyze why the drug problem is so bad and how people are trying to stop the drug overdose epidemic. There will also be community members giving their take on the drug overdose crisis Canada is currently facing.
10 people die from an overdose every day in Canada. I think that's crazy, first of all. I think people don't know the statistics because it's almost like a norm and we don't see everybody. Like, even if all your friends, like, do drugs, for example, like, we don't see, like, them dying just because it's not, you don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not happening, so I guess, like, we don't talk about it that much.
I think, in my opinion, I'm not surprised that 10 people die of a drug overdose every day. I think it's very sad, but I'm not surprised. I think we have a huge problem in Canada right now, especially with the Native American people, and I think there's a lot more that can be done in the area of prevention. So we could probably avoid some of these deaths from overdose if we put more effort into prevention in Canada.
In Unit 1, we learned about anthropology, sociology, and psychology. Psychology is all about the study of people's minds. Mental health and addiction go hand in hand. Lots of people we even call addiction a mental illness. When someone has a mental illness, they are more susceptible to have a drug problem. According to CAMH, which is the Center for Addiction and Mental Health, a person with a mental health disorder is twice as likely to have co-occurring substance use problems as the average person. The BC Coroner Service has previously said more than half of those who died from drug overdoses in BC in 2016 and 2017 had been diagnosed with a mental health disorder or had evidence of being mentally ill. The mind and drug addiction are so intertwined. There is no way to treat one without the other. This is why centers like CAMH are so important. Treatment at these facilities are not perfect and do not work 100% of the time, but to solve the drug overdose crisis, more help needs to be readily available for those who are battling drug addiction.
I understand that there's a strong connection between mental health and mental illness and drug overdose and drug abuse. I think that a lot of people with mental health issues feel lost and hopeless. They often turn to drugs as an escape to help them cope with their problems and deal with their problems. And unfortunately, some of the minor recreational drug abuse situations can turn into addictions once they start using the heavier drugs. So I think if we put some more effort into mental illness and start to treat that differently and give these people other coping mechanisms, we could probably stop the strong connection between the two.
Evolutionary theory of change is all about how society evolves over time for the better. The miracles of modern-day medicine are part of that evolution. To battle drug overdoses, scientists have come up with the drug Naxalone, better known as Narcan. This drug can reverse the effects of an opioid overdose. The drug was created in 1996, but has become more readily available in the past years as drug overdose deaths have risen due to fentanyl, the drug that is 100 times more powerful than morphine. The Center for Disease Control estimates that organizations that provide Narcan and instructions on how to use it saved 27,000 lives between 1996 and 2015. Drugs like these give people a fighting chance to survive an overdose. The evolution of modern-day medicine has saved so many lives, and Narcan is just one example. I shared a statistic earlier that on average 10 people died of an overdose in Canada each day. The problem is that those 10 people aren't just stats. They are real people that had a life and had a family, and now they don't. On a micro level, each death impacts a small group of people. Michelle Schwartzmeyer shared the story of her daughter's death from an overdose, and it was heartbreaking. This just reiterates that these deaths are tragedies, and so many people are being impacted by them that we don't even think about. On a macro level, the drug trade industry is huge. Drugs are being smuggled into Canada from all across the world to be sold here. Canadian border agents try and stop the drugs from getting in, but smuggling methods have become too good and the drugs are getting on the streets. The drug industry affects us on both a macro and micro level. Drug addiction is the ultimate example of cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is when you have two conflicting thoughts or emotions in your head, kind of like the devil in one ear and an angel in another. For drug addicts, this conflict is that you know that addiction is bad and there are many dangers to doing drugs, but you feel so good while you are high. The sad part is, with addicts, most of the time they ignore the consequences and only focus on getting high, and many times this can cost them their life. Adolescence is the time in between childhood and adulthood. It is the teenage years of a person's life. This is the time in a person's life when they try a lot of new things and don't think about the consequences. It is natural for a teen to experiment with drugs and alcohol. However, some drugs are way more dangerous and addictive than others. In class, we talk about the difference between social drug use and needing to use it. The scary thing about drugs is no one tries them thinking they are going to get addicted. I know people who have fell down the rabbit hole and you can't stop it before it's too late. Drugs like cocaine and heroin are incredibly addictive. Most people know someone who has been affected by it, and no community, family, or demographic is exempt from it. Deviance is behavior that violates the standards of conduct or expectations of society. This is part of Robert Merton's social strain typology. The deviance of drug abusers would fall under retreatism. Retreatism is to reject both the cultural goals and the means to obtain it, then find a way to escape it. Escape is the key word here. A lot of drug users use the drugs because the high gives them a momentary escape from their life. This is not a healthy way of dealing with problems. Robert Merton believed that the lower class was more likely to show deviance. The same is true for drug use. A high rate of overdose deaths in BC are from those who have little to no income. This shows that those with less money and status are more likely to turn to drugs, just like they are to do deviant behavior.
Um, 10 people die from an overdose every day in Canada. I think that's crazy, first of all. I think people don't know the statistics because it's almost like a norm and we don't see everybody. Like, even if all your friends, like, do drugs, for example, like, we don't see, like, them dying just because it's not, you don't see it, it doesn't mean it's not happening, so I guess, like, we don't talk about it that much, yeah.
I think there's a strong connection with people with low SES and the use and abuse of drugs. I think that poverty causes a lot of mental health issues, and drugs, again, is another coping mechanism that they turn to. Also, once these people get addicted to drugs, it's very, very hard to keep a job and hold a job, and all they do is become obsessed with finding money to buy their drugs. So even if they did have employment before, I think a lot of these people lose their employment and end up living on the streets and turning to prostitution and things like that to earn the money to buy their drugs and to feed their addiction.
When interviewing people, the common emotions shared were frustration and sadness. A lot of the time, people feel helpless when discussing the drug crisis. We try to find ways to cure people dying of cancer and ALS, but we ignore people dying of drug overdoses. Nearly all of the people I interviewed came from middle class or upper class society. A lot of these people have been sheltered from the reality of the drug overdose crisis in Canada. If I had interviewed people from lower income neighborhoods or communities that have high overdose rates, I think the reactions would have been different. It's important to talk with community members to see what they know about certain topics. Not everyone has learned the same things or had the same experiences, so their thoughts and perspectives can be completely different. In a course like Challenge and Change in Society, you have to keep in mind that not everyone in society has the same values, beliefs, or knowledge on a topic, which is why meaningful change can be so hard and slow. In conclusion, Canada has a drug overdose crisis. While the mentally ill and those in poverty are more likely to die from an overdose, no community is safe. People need to accept that we have a huge issue on our hand, and we have a moral responsibility to try and help. More government-funded places like CAMH that help with both mental health and addiction is a good place to start. Meaningful change needs to start so that drug users don't just die and become another statistic. They can be helped and live a life worth living.